Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and the culture. This is WallBuilders Live, and we're talking about today's hottest topics on policy and faith and the culture. We're here with David Barton, America's premier historian and the founder of WallBuilders. My name's Rick Green. I'm a former Texas legislator, and we have had an invasion in the studio. Now, later in the program, we're going to have Matt Walsh with us. Tim Barton is missing, and some guy has just shown up in the studio here. We got to introduce our audience to Jonathan Ritchie. David, who is this guy? How'd he get in here?
I'm trying to figure out what Jonathan is. You know, we've had another millennial with Tim. Doesn't know whether he's a Gen Z or Gen Y. What are you, Jonathan?
That's a great question that I've been asking since apparently before I was born.
Yeah,
just don't assume anything.
Well, Jonathan is one of our key researchers here at WallBuilders. When we do leadership training in the summer with young people from 18 through 25, Jonathan is a key part of that. He's one of the instructors there with the young people. He is really, really, really good on history, law, government, politics, and communicating and expressing it. So he's going to be a great,
everything.
Yeah, just ask yourself. That's right. Are you good at everything? Yes, I am.
Especially humility.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. In fact, Tim's traveling to Israel and, frankly, all over the world. So, Jonathan, we appreciate you stepping in and filling in for Tim.
Yeah, I found some spare time in my schedule, so, figured I'd, give it to some community service.
Yeah.
Hey, you may just take over the seat. We may not let Tim back in, David. What do you think?
Well, we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, after we lose all of our listeners.
Right. Well, guys, let's dive right into it. We call this the intersection of faith and the culture, and of course that begs the question, is the church still influencing the culture? Are we still having an impact?
Well, that's a huge question now, and if you look at polling, the answer would probably be no, because right now it looks like the culture is shaping the church more than the church is shaping culture. There is a growing body of Christians that's getting stronger, but overall, the direction of the culture would suggest that the church itself is not exerting much influence. We talked in previous programs how that right now polling shows about 72% of the church says they really don't agree with the teachings of the Bible. We don't like what it says, and so we've got our own view. About 28% say they do agree with that, but of that 28%, only about 10% actually takes the Bible and applies it to current issues. So you're at about 2.8% of pastors and leaders that actually believe the Bible should be spoken out on the issues of the day and address those issues. So clearly it's not shaping. Now, I've got to say, I had a real epiphany a couple weeks ago. I was in Turkey. It turned out I was with a group, and we were kind of following the track of the 7 churches in the book of Revelation, where the Apostle John wrote to the 7 churches in Asia Minor, which is Turkey, and said, here's the good stuff, here's the bad stuff, here's the good, the bad, the ugly. So as I was going through that, we were standing in the location of each of those 7 churches in the book of Revelation, and they're not churches in the sense of physical buildings. The word actually means to the community of Christians at Laodicea, to the community of Christians at Ephesus, or all of the Pergamon, all those 7 churches. And so as we went into each, you got to remember that Christianity was a brand new religion back then. The Roman Empire had been there for centuries already. Christianity just shows up as something new. And as we stood in these places and we saw these massive, massive temples to Artemis or Apollon or Athena or whoever it was, massive temples. What struck me was that in more than half of those temples became Christian churches. And now there's a Christianity that transforms your culture. Within a century, you come in and you have so changed the culture that these massive temples to pagan gods are now the places where Christians are meeting. And I was trying to think, I don't know many examples of Planned Parenthood having become churches, former Planned Parenthood buildings closing down, or, take any other thing that's counterculture and contrary to biblical values. There's just not many examples where the Christians have taken that and turned it into a place of Christian worship. And so I really saw the New Testament Christianity as being transformative. And what we have in America is more of a survivalist kind of Christianity. We just hope we can make it through and we'll stay quiet and keep our heads down and hopefully nobody will shoot at us. But man, what I saw over in Asia Minor was really transformative. And so Matt has this brand new book called A Church of Cowards. Matt Walsh, great author. We've had him on from time to time. He's national news commentator and has a great column. And just the title was captivating. So we thought that'd be a great thing to discuss given the current climate in America.
Matt Walsh will be with us when we return. Stay with us. You're listening to WallBuilders Live. The Founding Fathers of America made a habit of reading through the Bible once a year. There's no better source of wisdom, and it is applicable to every issue in our lives. What a great time for us as American citizens to take this time. If you've got extra time at home now, if you're quarantined at home and you're looking for something to do, what better thing could there be to do than to read through the Bible, maybe for the first time in your life? I tried to make this a habit several years ago, and I had a new tool to start doing that with, and it was called the Founder's Bible. It gave me a chance not only to read through the Bible once a year, but also to learn history while I was doing that. And what I love about the Founder's Bible is that as I'm reading that scripture, then all of a sudden there'll be an article inserted right there by that scripture about what the Founding Fathers learned from that specific verse or chapter and how they applied it to launch our nation. It's a really fun way to learn. It's incredibly empowering, and it has answers for today. The Bible is full of all the right answers for today. In fact, it's the only source that has all the right answers. So if you haven't read through the Founder's Bible, I challenge you and encourage you, get a copy of the Founder's Bible today. It's available at wallbuilders.com, and we even have it a digital version, so you can do this on your phone or iPad or computer. Check out the Founder's Bible today. Make it a part of your regular reading throughout the year, but right now is a great opportunity to read through the Founder's Bible. Check it out today at wallbuilders.com. Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us today. Matt Walsh back with us. Been way too long, brother. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
So, new book out. By the way, people can read your articles, of course, at Daily Wire if they haven't figured that out. Great stuff. I love reading your material, and so I'm very much looking forward to the new book and curious about what motivated you to write it. I think is probably pretty obvious in the title, and certainly if anybody reads your material, they're familiar. But it's called Church of Cowards, A Wake-Up Call to Complacent Christians. Now, Matt, you're also the author of The Unholy Trinity. That was just, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? Hadn't been that long.
Yeah, about 3 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, about 3 years ago. Okay, so this one, though, is basically calling out the church. I mean, the other one was basically saying, here's the left coming after us. And what you're saying with this book is, well, of course they're going to come after us if we're weak-kneed and don't know how to stand up for truth.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly right. I think most Christians, when they look around the culture and they look especially at the church and Christianity generally, Christendom in the West, they know that there's a problem. And any statistic that you look at, of course, we always see these census reports and everything about the number of Christians declining as the number of atheists and secular people goes up. But I think the reality is even worse than the numbers show, because even among the professed Christians, if you talk to them, how many of them will actually affirm all the basic doctrines of the faith? Well, that number is shockingly low. So the question is, why is this happening? That's what I try to address in the book, and I think there are many different elements to it that I go into, but I think broadly speaking, the problem is that we're so comfortable and complacent in this culture as Christians. We're sort of floating on the tide of the culture and going wherever it takes us. And it's taking us right into relativism and then secularism and everything else.
Well, you talk about, too, the spiritual junk food we're stuffing ourselves with, and that's probably a lot to blame for why we, if you look at the surveys that Barna does, we have such a low percentage of quote-unquote professing Christians that have an actual biblical worldview, that actually follow Christ's commands, or at least say they believe in them, whether they follow them or not. But, is it the fault of really the church itself not equipping the people that are coming in every Sunday morning, not actually teaching those hard truths and tough truths, but instead, like you said, just pure spiritual feel-good junk food?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a big part of it. When I talk about Church of Cowards, and I make clear in the book that many of the cowards are the people that are in leadership positions in the churches around the country that have become so afraid of engaging the culture and of speaking out against a lot of the moral evils that we see, and calling their congregations to sacrifice and obedience and moral living. These kinds of phrases are now anathema. They can't be spoken because you're afraid you're going to scare people away. And what's happened is we're more interested in tickling the ears and making people feel comfortable. And so it's not surprising to see what the result is. And it's also interesting that this is all done by the churches in order to attract people, because you think that if you soft pedal it, that more people will come. But it's had the exact opposite effect. That it's actually causing people to leave. I think because people are saying, well, if this is all I'm getting from church, and if this is all that Christianity has to offer, what's the point of it? I can get this anywhere. And I think that's what's happening.
no different. It's no different. Why would I give up the fun of sin and these things in the world, if this isn't really that much more of a challenging life? In fact, you start off the book, like page 1, with a pretty interesting statement: Christians not worth killing. So, I mean, you're basically saying, look, that if we're living that kind of life, the left doesn't have to come after us. There doesn't have to be an attack because we're being ineffectual.
Yeah. I still, as I mentioned in that first chapter, I still hear from Christians sometimes who are worried about the violent persecution that you see overseas in the Middle East and Africa and Asia, that they're worried that it will come here and that we'll be, Christians will be getting marched off to the concentration camps and the gulags and everything else, or stoned to death in the street like they are in some Muslim countries. Well, my point is, I don't think it's going to happen here because there's no reason for it to happen here. We are, as I say, Christians not worth killing, not worth persecuting. We're abandoning our faith on our own, and we see that Satan, has a carrot or a stick approach, and for us, it's kind of the carrot, encouraging us along, tempting us along, making things very comfortable for us so that we don't stop to think about the fate of our eternal souls.
Well, you mentioned the Middle East and other places around the world where your Christianity really does cost you. And you've drawn this distinction in your articles in the past. I thought was really powerful is we just don't, it's hard for us to even fathom what it really costs to be a Christian. It's actually really easy to be a Christian here in our world, here in America, where in other parts of the world, when you make that decision and you truly follow, it can cost you everything. That requires you to dig deeper and really believe what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. I think what's the worst thing that we face as Christians if we in this country in the West, if we stand up and profess our faith for most of us. Now there are people that have faced worse consequences. You think of like Jack Phillips and Masterpiece Cake Shop and some of the Christian business owners that have faced the loss of their business, which is certainly serious. So I would call that real persecution, not as serious as losing your life, but still serious. For most of us, we don't even face that much. For most of us, it's you stand up and you're a Christian and you're open about it. The worst is somebody will look at you funny and you'll get mean comments on the internet and maybe someone will throw a frowny face in your direction. But that's kind of the worst of it. But even that for us is enough for a lot of us to go hiding under the bed, cowering, because I think we've become so science.
And it's not as if the opportunity's not there, right? I mean, with so many culture fights going on, the opportunity to stand up and not be a coward certainly is there. It's not that there's a lack of persecution, as you said, very different level of persecution than they're taking your life. But there's plenty of opportunity to actually be bold as a Christian in America today, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. If you look at, you want to talk about groups of people in America that are being persecuted, I would say that Christians, broadly speaking, really aren't. But here's a category of people that are persecuted: children. Starting with in the womb, that 1 million of them are killed every single year in the womb, and then even when they emerge from the womb, if they manage to escape that gauntlet, they come out into a world that is very eager to exploit them, to take away their innocence, scandalize them, and abuse them. We see this all around. Everything with the drag queen story hours and everything else.
Yeah.
The sexualization of children. Now, there's an opportunity there for Christians to stand up and speak out and be forceful about it and be angry and to have hatred even for, not for people, but for the evil that is happening to our children. Yes, we're absolutely, there's an opportunity for Christians to speak up. Some do, but not nearly enough. If 80% of the country is Christian and all 80% of us were speaking up with fury against these evils, none of it would be happening because it would be so overwhelming. But that's, we're just not.
No, and I think there's a lot of the church out there that is just looking for the banner to rally around. I mean, I forget when you started your blog. Was that like 2012, 13? How long ago was that?
Yeah,
Am I going back far
13, I think.
Yeah. So somewhere. I mean, when you started speaking so boldly, I mean, you went from total obscurity, right, to 5 million people following and reading those blogs. And I'm sure you got your own theories about why. As an outsider watching it, to me, it was because this was the most bold statements and articles and clearly calling out some of how crazy this leftist agenda in America was on sexual issues and everything else that, frankly, most of the church was scared to death to touch the third rail. whether it was the gender issue or whatever. And when you raised that banner, it seemed like to me millions rallied around. So I think people want truth and they want to stand up, but a lot of times they don't know where to, or they don't have a leader that's giving that clarion call. Is that a fair statement? And was that your experience?
Yeah, I think it's a fair statement. That's an encouraging aspect of it. Well, it's both encouraging and discouraging in some ways. Encouraging because, yeah, when anybody speaks up on these things, it's certainly been my experience. There is a chorus of people who speak up also and in agreement and shout, amen. And so it's nice to know, okay, I'm actually not alone. Sometimes even I can feel alone in some of the things that I think and believe. But then when I go out and talk about them and I hear from people, I realize, okay, no, there's a lot of us out there.
No, that's not to downplay. I'm sure you've had many death threats and all kinds of, negative response as well. I'm not suggesting that it was all easy for you it was probably very tough because of the stances you were taking.
Yeah, well, certainly, and anyone who's in the public eye, you're going to get the hate and everything. So that's going to happen. But I think the discouraging aspect of it, when you hear the silent masses finally speak up, it's where you think, well, why are you silent? Like, why is this the first time I'm hearing you? And I'll have this experience sometimes where I'll talk about something, and I am getting a big backlash, and then I'll get like private messages and emails from people saying, hey, by the way, I really agree with you on this thing. And I think, well, great, I'm glad you agree, but why are you whispering it to me behind the bushes? Like, come out and speak up so that people know, not for my sake, but just so that people know that there's more force behind this truth that you also agree is the truth.
No, that's right, man. I couldn't agree more. I see that all the time, where it's like, when nobody else is around. Hey, I actually kind of like what you're saying over there. But okay, let me ask you this, Matt. If somebody reads the book, what are you hoping happens? What's kind of your clarion call to them with this particular book, Church of Cowards?
My hope is that people will come away from it encouraged. It's not a feel-good book by any stretch of the imagination, as you could tell from the title, but I do want to encourage people. It is, you might say confrontational, so I guess in a way I'm confronting the reader and myself. So it's a difficult book to write in some ways, because I see so much of myself in the things I'm talking about and the problems I see in the church. But what I'd like for them to take away from it is just to, when you put the book down, to stop and think, do a personal inventory and think, first of all, as a Christian, I claim to believe many different extraordinary and often startling things about a God who became man and died for our sins, and all these different things. These are startling claims. And so do I actually believe that? Do I actually believe that these things are true? If I do, then is that reality? Does it manifest in my life? The things that I do and the way that I live, does that reflect these beliefs that I hold? Because if we are right as Christians about all these things that we claim, then that should have implications on everything we do. That should lead into every single thing we do. Nothing should be exempt. There shouldn't be any part of our life that's put in a box and put in the corner, and we say, well, no, it's not going to touch that. That's our thing. Faith has nothing to do with it. There can be nothing like that. And so I guess we have to begin with that sort of inventory.
Sounds to me like it's really, it is the Great Commission. It is the gospel. You're saying, be a disciple, actually follow his commands. Don't just walk the aisle and take on the title and the label, but actually follow those commands where you actually see that result in your life. Last question, Matt, the cover itself, black and white. I mean, was this were you afraid of scaring people off if they saw you in full color? I mean, it's got your picture, but it's black and white. What's the deal, man?
Well, I didn't realize they were going to go with the picture of my ugly mug on the cover. So I hope that doesn't scare people away. But I guess it's the way they make books these days.
Yeah, it is what it is. All right, Church of Cowards, a wake-up call to complacent Christians. Matt Walsh, place you want to send people to get the book. I know it's everywhere, but where do you prefer to send folks?
I would say just the easiest thing, go to Amazon and order it now.
All right, let's put Matt up there at the top. Great book, Church of Cowards, a wake-up call to complacent Christians. You can read Matt on the Daily Wire on a regular basis. Always good to have you, man. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely, Rick. Thank you.
Stay with us. You're listening to WallBuilders Live. Hey, friends, it's Rick Green from WallBuilders Live, and I have had so many requests about what in the world can we be studying at home right now. You know, I got the kids at home. They're normally in school, or if you homeschool, you're looking for additional material. One Room Schoolhouse. It is a great new series WallBuilders is putting out where you literally get a tour of the WallBuilders library as Tim Barton and Jonathan Ritchie bring history to life. There's a couple of resources on this. You can go to YouTube and search for WallBuilders and look for One Room Schoolhouse. You can go to our Facebook page and get it right there on Facebook as we do it live each Monday and sometimes additional days from there. And then you can also just go to wallbuilders.com. Scroll down to the bottom and we'll be posting the videos as they come out. This is such a great way to learn and a great way for you to share it with others. Gather the family around, watch the One Room Schoolhouse, and learn some great history. It'll be vitally important to restoring our nation and bringing back these principles that made America great in the first place. Check it out, One Room Schoolhouse at wallbuilders.com. We're back on WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Special thanks to Matt Walsh for joining us today. We're back with Jonathan Ritchie and David Barton. And guys, so what do you think? Are we actually a church of cowards, and can we turn this thing around?
Yeah, I mean, I basically agree with everything that Mr. Walsh was talking about. I mean, just from my perspective, you know, being centuries younger than you guys.
Centuries.
Oh, my.
Wait a minute.
Walks
Jonathan,
in and slaps us.
You're lumping me in with David? Is it like just anybody over the 20s is just old? Is that the deal?
Look, I mean, I was under the impression that y'all were taught by Peter, so some apostolic authority, right?
Whoa.
Right, yeah. We haven't passed it on well, have we, David?
Apparently not.
Well, I've enjoyed this time with you guys.
Yeah, one show with Jonathan, we're done.
Sorry, I'm just trying to be courageous. You know, I don't want to be a coward.
That's right.
Just trying to apply these life lessons.
Right, right.
No, I mean,
Speaking truth.
Yeah, with love.
Yeah.
Whatever. So from my perspective, I mean, growing up, there's so many young adults things, young adult services. I mean, for most big churches, even mid-sized churches, they have a whole nother day of the week set aside for kind of young adults, 20-somethings to go to church. And I know a lot of people actually substitute that for like their Sunday morning church times. And, you know, in those especially, the thing that I've noticed is that it's all very kind of the milk of Christianity. You know, it's all very feelings, emotion-driven, right? And there's, you know, obviously I would say there's a time and a place for us to, you know, really kind of worship in that way, but we have to have the facts, we have to have the meat, we have to have that courageous thing driving us on, right? What's the old saying, right? It takes a living fish to swim upstream, right? So we have to have some sort of life in our Christianity if we're going to go against the flow, go against culture. I think of C.S. Lewis, right, in the Screwtape Letters. He has a great letter. It's letter 29 that talks about the difference between cowardice and courage, and I'd recommend everybody to go read it. But Walsh talked about how we've kind of become complacent because we think that we're safe, right? We think that there's nothing really to fight against. Oftentimes in church, right, we're not being oppressed like they are in Africa, the church is, or in China, right? We're not being, you know, with guns and bayonets driven underground, so we don't think necessarily that there's something to go against. And
well, that goes to what Walsh was saying about we've become a church that's not worth killing.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Why do you need to persecute the American church? They ain't doing nothing.
Yeah, we're doing it ourselves.
We're a threat to no one. and so we really have become that. And, you know, I thought it's interesting talking about how that the youth services for young adults are kind of replacing even going to church, but they are about feelings.
Yep.
And instead of teaching, you know, as the Bible says, you should be past drinking milk by now. You ought to be eating steaks and hard food. We're still not dealing with that. And I was thinking even of the lack of really confrontational biblical teaching, if you will. Now, I say confrontational in the sense that we don't go out of church wanting to confront the culture.
Yeah.
We go out of church not wanting to be seen so that nobody targets us. Mm-hmm. And we really do have to get that. As Matt said, we become more interested in tickling the ears and making people feel comfortable. And we've got to get away from that. When you're comfortable, you don't grow, you don't change.
Yep.
You have to be uncomfortable to want something different in life. And we're not making people uncomfortable. We're trying to make them comfortable as the frog boiling in the pot. Just get used to the warm water. It's all right. You don't need to jump out of the pot. And that really does have to change. So his book, great emphasis, A Church of Cowards. Matt has always spoken with great courage, but this is one worth reading and considering. and then looking in the mirror and doing some self-examination and saying, so where do I fall on this church of cowards?
Is the church full of cowards? Check out Matt Walsh's new book. It's available everywhere. Get it on Amazon and all your online bookstores. Probably not walking into any bookstores anywhere in the nation right now, unfortunately, with these overzealous governors having shut down everything rather than targeting specifically where we're having significant coronavirus problems. But I don't want to get off on that tangent again. Go watch the videos about quarantines and the Constitution and how we've now quarantined the Constitution. Anyway, check it all out at constitutioncoach.com. That's also a great place for you to take our Constitution class, Constitution Alive, with David Barton and Rick Green. It's available at wallbuilders.com. If you want to get the DVD set, place that order today. And if you want to host a class, we have a licensed system set up right now that is entirely free. So you become a Constitution host for free. Get online today at constitutioncoach.com to do that. And when you do that, you'll be able to connect with your friends and family on Zoom and bring them in and take the Constitution class with them. It is vital that we know our rights, that we know when they've been violated, and that we're the better prepared to defend and assert them. That's the way John Jay put it. And boy, today, do we need to know our rights. We need to know what the proper role of government is. We need to know where that police power needs to stop. And we need to know what our job as citizens is. What are we supposed to do when we see government making that overreach? Check it out at constitutioncoach.com. And also, I want to challenge and encourage you to go to wallbuilderslive.com and make a contribution. I know it's tough times. I know a lot of people are facing significant financial hardship, and so for some of you, it's just impossible right now to make a contribution. But for many of you, it's not. This is a time where you can support voices of truth like us here at WallBuilders Live and help us get the education out to folks so that they understand the importance of defending those constitutional principles. A great way to support that effort is to go to wallbuilderslive.com today and make a contribution. We sure appreciate you. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand under